The Christmas tree was already up when I arrived. That surprised me. My daughter had always waited until the week before Christmas to put it up. That was our tradition. Something she grew up with, something I thought she carried forward. But there it was, standing in the corner of the living room, fully decorated, lights blinking slowly, tinsel catching the afternoon light. Pretty. Deliberate. Like something staged for a magazine. She met me at the door with a hug that lasted exactly the right amount of time. Not too short, not too long. My son-in-law shook my hand and took my suitcase without being asked. My grandson, 8 years old and already too tall, ran down the hallway and crashed into my legs. That part was real. That part I held on to. "Mum, we're so glad you're here," my daughter said. I told her I was glad too. And I was. I had driven 6 hours from Savannah to get to their house in Charlotte, and the whole way I had played my old gospel CDs and talked myself into being grateful. My hip had been hurting since September. My house felt too big since my husband passed. My neighbor, the one who used to check on me, had moved to be near her own children in Phoenix. So when my daughter called in October and said, "Mama, just come stay with us through the new year," I said yes before she finished the sentence. I should have let her finish the sentence. The first 2 weeks were fine. Better than fine, honestly. I cooked Sunday dinner. I helped my grandson with his reading. My son-in-law and I watched football on Thursday nights, and he made a good pot of chili. I'll give him that. My daughter and I stayed up late one night drinking tea and laughing about the time she got lost at the state fair when she was 6 and was found 40 minutes later eating a corn dog with a very patient security guard. We hadn't laughed like that in years. I thought, this is going to be good. I thought I made the right choice. But things have a way of shifting so gradually that you don't notice until you're already off course. It started small. My daughter asked to borrow my phone charger because hers was broken. That was fine. Then she said she would take my phone to the store to get the cracked screen fixed, and it came back 3 days later. I hadn't asked her to do that, and I didn't say anything because it was a kind thing to do, and I didn't want to be ungrateful. But when it came back, something felt different. I don't know how else to explain it. It just felt like the phone had been somewhere I wasn't aware of. Then there was the mail. I had put in a forwarding request before I left Savannah, just for the time I'd be in Charlotte. My bank statements, my insurance documents, my church newsletter, everything was supposed to come to my daughter's address. The first few weeks she'd hand me the envelopes unopened. Then one day I noticed an envelope from my bank sitting on the kitchen counter, already open, tucked under a fruit bowl like it had been read and set aside. I picked it up and looked at her. She said, "Oh, it came open in the stack. I wasn't paying attention." She was already walking toward the laundry room when she said it, not looking at me. I put the statement in my purse and didn't say anything. I am 67 years old. I spent 31 years as an administrative coordinator for a school district in Georgia. I know what an unopened envelope looks like, and I know what one looks like after someone has run a finger under the seal. Christmas came, and it was lovely on the surface. My grandson got the remote control truck he'd been asking for since August. My daughter made a glazed ham and sweet potato casserole, and my son-in-law's mother came for the afternoon. A quiet woman named Patrice who kept complimenting the centerpiece. We ate well. We opened gifts. My daughter gave me a silk robe in a soft burgundy color and said she picked it because it reminded her of something I used to wear when she was little. I don't remember ever owning something like that, but I thanked her and meant it. After dinner, the adults sat in the living room while my grandson played with his new truck in the hallway, crashing it into the baseboards with great enthusiasm. My son-in-law poured small glasses of brandy. Everyone was relaxed and warm. I excused myself to use the restroom off the main hallway, the one near the home office. The office door was open. Not wide open, just ajar, the way it gets when the latch doesn't catch all the way. I wasn't looking for anything. I was just walking down a hallway in a house I'd been living in for 6 weeks, but I glanced in the way you do, the way anyone would, and I saw my name, my full legal name, on a document sitting on the desk. I stopped. I don't know how long I stood there in the hallway, long enough that my grandson came rolling his truck around the corner and crashed it into my ankle. I reached down and steadied him, said, "Careful, baby," and walked back to the living room. I sat in my chair. I picked up my glass of brandy. I listened to my son-in-law talk about some sports trade that had happened that week, and I nodded in the right places, and I did not say a single word about what I had just seen. That night, I waited until the house was quiet. My daughter and her husband went to bed around 11. I could hear the television in their room go off at 11:30. I lay in the guest room and stared at the ceiling and listened to the house breathe. Old houses settle at night. This one was only 12 years old, but it had its sounds: the furnace clicking on, the refrigerator hum, a tree branch somewhere outside that tapped against a window when the wind was right. At 1 in the morning, I got up. I walked down the hallway in my socks, past my grandson's room where I could hear him breathing through his little mouth, past the laundry room that still smelled like fabric softener, and into the office. I didn't turn on the overhead light. I used the small lamp on the desk, the one that gave off just enough light to read by. The document was still there. I sat down and I read it. Every page. I am not a fast reader, but I am a careful one, and I had 31 years of reading administrative paperwork that was designed to make simple things complicated. So I read slowly, and I understood what I was reading. It was a durable power of attorney. My name was on it as the principal. My daughter's name was on it as the agent. There were provisions for financial management, banking authority, real estate decisions, and the ability to make changes to my investment accounts. It had not been signed yet. There was a sticky note in my son-in-law's handwriting. I recognized it from the grocery lists he stuck to the refrigerator that said "Notary, first week of Jan, before she goes back." I sat with that for a long moment. Before she goes back. So I had a return date in their plans. I just hadn't been told about it. I folded nothing. I moved nothing. I turned off the lamp and walked back to the guest room and sat on the edge of the bed in the dark. I was not panicking. I want to be clear about that. What I felt was not panic. It was something colder and quieter than panic. It was the feeling of a door closing somewhere inside you, the click of a latch, something that cannot be undone. I had sold my house in Savannah 4 years ago, after my husband's medical bills made it necessary. I had used a portion of the proceeds to pay off debt, and the rest, a significant amount, sat in accounts that I had managed carefully and quietly for 4 years. My daughter knew about those accounts because I had told her, in a moment of trust I now wished I could retrieve. She knew the approximate amount. She knew which bank. I sat on the edge of the bed and I thought about my husband, who had died in February of last year, and who had told me 2 days before he passed, "Celia, nobody loves you the way I do, and you need to know that, because people will come." I had thought he was being sentimental. He was not being sentimental. He was being precise. The next morning I made breakfast: scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice. My grandson ate 2 plates. My daughter came down in her robe and thanked me. My son-in-law poured his own coffee and talked about the weather and whether it would snow before New Year's. I smiled and passed the butter and thought about exactly what I was going to do. I had spent 31 years working in a school district, and in that role I had dealt with more than one situation involving a person in a position of trust doing something they should not have done. I knew that the worst thing you can do when you discover something like that is to confront directly before you are prepared. Confrontation without preparation is just noise. It gives the other person time to adjust their story, move their pieces, create a version of events that makes you look confused or emotional or, as the document on that desk had implied without saying so, possibly not fully competent to manage my own affairs. I did not look confused. I did not feel emotional. I felt precise. That afternoon, while my daughter took my grandson to a birthday party for one of his classmates, I asked my son-in-law if I could borrow the car to run some errands. He said, of course. He seemed relieved, actually, that I was being self-sufficient. I drove to a library 2 towns over. I used their computer terminal. I looked up elder law attorneys in the Charlotte area. I found one whose reviews mentioned specifically that she worked with seniors navigating financial protection and family disputes. Her office was closed for the holiday week, but her website had an emergency contact number. I called it from the parking lot. Her name was not important. What mattered was that she answered, that she was calm, and that when I told her in 5 sentences what I had found on that desk, she did not tell me I was overreacting. She told me to write down the name of my bank, the account numbers I could remember, the date I had seen the document, and the exact wording of that sticky note. She said she had availability on January 2nd. She said to come in at 9 in the morning and bring whatever documentation I had with me. I drove back to my daughter's house. I made a pot of soup for dinner. I watched a movie with my grandson that evening, something animated with talking animals, and I let him fall asleep against my arm on the couch, and I sat very still so I wouldn't wake him. New Year's Eve was quiet. My daughter and her husband had been invited to a party, and they asked if I would mind watching my grandson. I said of course not. We played card games and ate too much popcorn and fell asleep before midnight. I woke up at 12:15 to the sound of distant fireworks and the glow of the television, some countdown replay, and my grandson still sleeping with his mouth open and one sock half off. I thought, I love this child completely. I thought, that does not change what has to happen. On January 2nd, I was sitting in an attorney's office at 9 in the morning. I had brought my bank statements, the ones from the envelopes I had quietly retrieved and kept in my purse since December. I had written down everything I remembered from the document in the office, as close to word for word as I could manage. I had my Social Security card, my Medicare card, my own identification. The attorney sat across from me and listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked a few clarifying questions. She was not surprised by anything I told her. That, more than anything else, told me what I needed to know about how common this was. She explained my options. She explained what a durable power of attorney actually meant once signed, that it would give my daughter nearly unlimited authority over my financial decisions, including the ability to move money, sell property if I ever acquired any again, and direct the distribution of my assets without my daily knowledge or consent. She explained that an unsigned document was not yet a legal instrument, but that I should act as if it would be attempted. She said, change your banking information first, then we'll talk about everything else. That afternoon, from a branch of my bank on the other side of Charlotte, I changed the contact address on my accounts back to a P.O. box in Savannah that I had maintained for years. I added a verbal password to my account, a requirement that anyone calling or visiting on my behalf would need to provide. I moved a portion of my funds to a new account my daughter did not know about, at a different institution entirely. The teller who helped me was a young woman who did not ask questions. She was efficient and professional, and when I thanked her, she said, "You have a good day now," in a tone that suggested she had helped people like me before. I drove back to my daughter's house that evening and made dinner. I did not tell her where I had been. She did not ask. We ate, we cleared the table. My son-in-law watched something loud on television in the other room. My daughter and I did the dishes together the way we used to when she was a teenager. She washed, I dried, and she talked about her plans for the spring, a vacation they were considering, a renovation they were thinking about for the guest bathroom. I listened. I had been a mother for 41 years. I knew this woman's voice in every register. When she was happy, when she was worried, when she was performing. She was performing. There was something underneath the conversation that she was working around, the way you work around a bruise without touching it directly. I finished drying the last dish. I folded the towel and hung it on the oven handle. I'm going to head back to Savannah on Friday, I said. She turned off the faucet. I thought you were staying through the end of the month. I've been here long enough, I said. I miss my routines. She looked at me for a long moment. Something moved across her face that I couldn't name exactly. Not guilt, not quite. More like recalculation. Okay, she said. We'll miss you. I'll miss you too, I said. And that was true. I spent Thursday packing, slowly the way you do when you're being careful not to forget things. I folded my clothes, wrapped my good shoes in the plastic bags I'd kept from the grocery store, put my documents in the inner pocket of my carry bag where I always kept important things. My grandson sat on the bed while I packed and asked me questions about Savannah. Was it near the ocean? Did they have good ice cream? Could he come visit in the summer? I told him yes to all three, even though I didn't know about the summer yet. That night, my daughter knocked on the guest room door around 9. She sat in the chair by the window. I sat on the edge of the bed. We talked for a while about nothing important. Memories, mostly. A trip we took to Florida when she was 12. A dog we had briefly and then gave away because he was too much. Her father and the way he used to whistle while he cooked. Then she said, Mum, have you ever thought about, have you considered that it might be good to have someone help manage things, just so everything is organized and protected? I looked at her. Like a financial advisor, I said. Or just someone close to you, she said. Someone you trust. I let the silence sit between us for a moment. Outside the window, the neighbor across the street was walking a dog. The streetlight caught the frost on the grass. I have everything organized, I said. I've had it organized for a long time. But I appreciate you thinking about me. She nodded. She looked at her hands. Okay, she said. She hugged me goodnight at the door. It lasted exactly the right amount of time. Friday morning, I loaded my car before she was up. My son-in-law helped me with the heaviest bag, and we said our goodbyes in the driveway in the cold. He shook my hand again. My daughter came out in her robe, hair undone, and held me for a moment longer than she usually did. My grandson was still asleep. I had said goodbye to him the night before, and he had told me to bring him a postcard from Savannah. I told him I would send him two. I backed out of the driveway. I turned onto the street. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. The drive back to Savannah took 6 hours and 20 minutes. I played my gospel CDs for the first 2 hours, then turned them off and drove in silence. I stopped once at a gas station outside Columbia and bought a small coffee and a bag of peanuts, and I sat in the parking lot for a few minutes watching the traffic on the interstate. Trucks heading south, a minivan with stickers on the back window, a red pickup going faster than anyone should. I thought about my daughter when she was 4 years old and used to fall asleep holding my finger. I thought about the document on the desk. I thought about my husband saying, "People will come." I pulled back onto the highway. I returned to the attorney's office in Savannah the following week. I had already transferred the name on my primary accounts. Now we talked about my estate documents, my will, my healthcare directive, my existing power of attorney, which I had assigned to my husband years ago and which had never been updated after his death. We spent 2 hours going through everything. She was thorough, and she did not rush. At the end she said, "You should also consider a letter of competency from your physician, not because anything is wrong, but because it creates a dated record that establishes clearly, in your own words and with medical verification, that you were of sound mind when you made these changes." I had an appointment with my doctor that Thursday already. I added it to the list. My doctor, a woman who had been my physician for 11 years and who once told me I had the blood pressure of someone 20 years younger, listened to my request without blinking. She said she would write the letter. She said she saw this more than people knew. More than people know. That phrase stayed with me. A month later, in February, my daughter called. We talked for almost an hour. She asked how I was doing, how my hip was feeling, whether I had made it to church. She did not mention the power of attorney. She did not mention the document. I did not mention them either. At the end of the call, she said, "Mom, I want you to know I love you." "I love you too," I said, and I meant it. I meant it the way you means something that is both true and complicated, the way you love someone who has disappointed you and confused you and made you grieve a version of them that you thought you knew. I hung up the phone. I went to the kitchen. I made myself a cup of tea, real tea, loose leaf, the kind that takes a few minutes, and I stood at my kitchen window and looked at my backyard. The camellia bush I'd planted the year we moved in was budding, just barely, pale pink edges showing through the dark green. In another 3 weeks, it would be fully open. I had a lock on my mailbox now, a good one. I had a shredder in the corner of my office. I had an attorney who answered her phone. I had this house, this window, this cup of tea. I stood there until the tea was gone. Then I washed the cup, dried it, put it away, and got on with my day. I've had a lot of time to think about what happened in Charlotte, in that guest room, in that hallway at 1 in the morning with a small lamp and a document I was never supposed to find. And here is what I keep coming back to. None of it happened overnight. That's the part people don't want to sit with. We want there to be a villain who woke up one morning and decided to do a terrible thing. It's easier that way. But what I lived through didn't work like that. It built slowly, the way rust builds, quietly, in the places you're not looking, until one day the whole thing gives. I had spent years being the kind of mother who said yes. Yes to the phone calls that came at inconvenient hours. Yes to the money when things got tight. Yes to showing up, to being available, to making myself smaller so there was more room for everyone else. I called it love, and some of it was. But some of it was something else, a habit I had dressed up as generosity, a pattern I had never examined because examining it would have required me to ask uncomfortable questions about what I was getting in return. What I got in return, it turned out, was a document on a desk. I don't say that to be bitter. I say it because I think the cause and the effect are connected in a way that matters. When you spend decades teaching the people around you that your boundaries are negotiable, that your no is just a not yet, that your resources are available upon request, you are teaching them something. You are teaching them that you are a resource. And resources in this world get managed. That is not a comfortable thing to write. But I am 67 years old and I have earned the right to be uncomfortable on the page. What saved me, and I mean that plainly, not dramatically, was not luck. It was the moment I chose clarity over comfort. The moment I sat in that dark guest room and decided that what I felt was not confusion, not paranoia, not the emotional overreaction of an old woman who didn't understand what she was seeing. I understood exactly what I was seeing, and I trusted that understanding. That is the hardest thing, sometimes. Not the action, but the decision to trust your own mind when someone you love is depending on you not to. Intelligence without courage is just information. I had worked in administration for 3 decades. I knew how documents worked. I knew what power of attorney meant. That knowledge meant nothing until I was willing to act on it, to get in a car, to make a phone call, to sit across from an attorney and say out loud what I had found. The moment I did that, something shifted. Not in the situation. The situation took weeks to fully address, but in me, something settled. I think about my daughter. I think about her often. I love her, and I know that love is real, and I also know that love does not require me to be unprotected. Those two things can exist at the same time. It took me most of my life to understand that. What I want, if anyone is listening, and I suppose that's why I'm telling this at all, is for you to trust what you see, not what you hope, not what you wish were true about the people you raised or the people who raised you, what you actually see. Your mind is still working. Your instincts are still sound. The paperwork on that desk is real. Get a good attorney. Change your passwords. Keep copies of everything. And stand at your own kitchen window with your own cup of tea in a house where you are the one who decides what happens next. That is not a small thing. That is everything.